Welcome back to dprocess.org, and in this tutorial we're going to show you how to import your models that you've created in other programs into your terrain model you've created in 3ds Max. So, this might look familiar. We created this model in another tutorial. Literally, it's the terrain model we made, and you want to put your building actually into this model. So, in order to do that, your first step, would be obviously to make the model. But once you have it made, you're going to import. You're going to find the AutoCAD model on your computer. You hit import, OK. And here's where you can modify how the model comes in. You can specify what layers. You can specify a lot of other stuff, like we don't want the images, and we don't want any of those. OK. Hit OK. Then the model's going to come in. And here's the model. Once it's inside of 3ds Max, if you've modeled it as a solid model, you can edit it just like you would if it was a solid model you created in 3ds Max. So right away, I know I don't want any lines. I don't need this mask anymore to serve as the ground plane. All I really need is the base model, which you can see right here. So now that I have the base model, I can move it around just like if it was created in 3ds Max. Let's go to the split view. You can hit Zoom Extents All, and that'll bring all 4 of the tiled windows up so you can see them evenly. So now that you're in here, you can start to move and position the model very, very, very accurately. So go ahead and set it down on something. There we go. See how we're looking? It's looking pretty good. Let's make this full screen. It's pretty close. Obviously, you can, once you're in here, you can fine-tune how you're placing it. There, now it's sitting on the ground. I can move it back into the site, bring it up just a little bit. Now, once I've got the building placed, that's not a really believable location because we have stairs. So you can hit the rotate, and then you can globally rotate the entire building how you need to. So I'll just leave it like this for right now. Now that the model is in here and it's kind of placed in the site where I want it to be, you can start to create some really quick renderings of the building in the site. And to do that, you're going to start to apply some materials. You're going to create a camera, and we're going to run through that real quick right now. So right now I'm in perspective view. As you can see right here, it says perspective and it says smooth highlights. As you remember here, you can adjust how the viewport is rendered. You can do hidden line, you can do wireframe, you can do flat. I like smooth and highlights, and sometimes I put on edge faces just so I can understand what kind of vertices and geometry I'm looking at. To create a camera, since I'm in perspective, all I have to do is hit Control-C, and then you notice that changed to camera. And now I'm in a camera. And what happens is when you're in a camera, you can start to specify what kind of lens, and the kind of lens you use determines your focal length, your field of view, all those kinds of parameters. And a lot of the times you're going to try to match whatever rendering you create with a photo of it on site you already have. But since we're not going to go through that, that'll be another tutorial. I'll just show you how you can manipulate the camera. So right now I've created a camera. Here's all the options that you can go through later if you want to. Now that I've got the camera created, I can select the walkthrough button, and if you see the hand button, all you have to do is left click, hold down, and then go to feet. Now that I've got that, I can walk just like I was in a first-person shooter video game. W is forward. You see I'm moving forward slowly. S is back. A is left. D is right. You can speed up by doing forward bracket, so the camera can move a little faster. And speed it up. There it goes. So now I can walk in and get closer to the building, so I can start to frame my view. I'm holding down the middle wheel to bring the camera down, so I can start to frame. Now this is a rule of thirds. If you don't know what rules of thirds is, it's a basic rule that photographers use to frame objects in the rendering. So this is a pretty good view. I mean, you can kind of start to see the building and the terrain as it falls away. So this would be really easy to create a rendering of and throw some terrain and people in. So now that I've got my camera created, I've got my lens selected, I need to start applying materials too. So apply materials, the shortcut for that is M. Now, you want to use the materials. First let me show you the render setup. Now, 3ds Max has a couple render engines built into it by default. There's the default scanline renderer, which is by default on if you see the dashed line. There's Mental Ray, and then There's a lighting analysis one. Right now, I'm going to show you how to use the sorry, excuse me. I'm going to show you how Mental Ray, how to use Mental Ray. It's a really effective render engine. I like using it. So right now we're gonna build this model and apply materials as if we were using Mental Ray. So to do Mental Ray, let's go ahead and let's pick a Mental Ray, one of the Mental Ray options. We're gonna do daylighting high. That's usually a good one, and it's gonna pop up this, and this is a preset, which 3ds Max. So it's gonna load the material editor. It's gonna load the environment. It's gonna load the illumination standards. So you just do that, and you'll notice everything will pop up. And we've changed, everything's been set up for you to start to use this. And as you can see, everything's been set up, the indirect illumination's been enabled, and so on and so forth. So now, let's move this guy out of the way real fast, and let's bring this guy over here. So let's start to pick some materials. Now, Mental Ray uses pro materials. Say I want to create something, a material now. So what we'll do is, right here are the pro materials, and these are materials that that Mental Ray uses and the Mental Ray engine is familiar with. So you can go through here, you can pick a material, and then now that I have that material loaded, I can adjust how it looks. I can apply bumps, I can enable the certain level of transparency, and to apply that material to a surface, you just literally drag and drop, and it's going to apply it to that terracotta layer. Now all the terracotta surfaces are going to be a specific color. You can create glass. A lot of the times to get a very basic glass, because glass can get rather intensive on the render engine, what I'll do is I'll just drop the opacity really far on this, and you can put a background on here. Now you can kind of start to see how the glass will be affected. You want to give it a specular level and a glossiness. If you start to use a lot of the pro materials, if you have a lot of glass, it can really start to affect the performance. So now all the glass has been given that layer. And so now that I have my materials applied to the surfaces, I'll come over here to the render, and I can go ahead and hit render. Now it's not gonna render the way I want it to, and I'm gonna show you why here in a second. So what happens is Mental Ray comes in and it takes over, and it's now, as you can see, these little white squares bouncing around. It's calculating all the lighting and the reflections that are required for the rendering. Now you notice the scene is black. And if you render a scene and this is what you see, it's because you don't have any lighting sources in there. And the renderings, the way they work is you create a light source, and the computer calculates the path of that light, and then what happens to that light once it bounces off of a surface based off that surface's parameters. So we haven't given it a light, so none of the surfaces can be illuminated because there's no light bouncing off of it. So I'll go ahead and cancel this rendering, and I'll show you how to throw in a basic daylighting situation into your model. So what you want to do is you want to go to Create, Lights, Daylight System. Now you'll see right here you're going to be creating a daylight system under the standard parameters. You could also get to it that way. But so what you're going to do is you're going to left click, and then you're just going to drag away, and you'll see that's the daylighting right there. Now that's going to be the sun, and you can start to adjust where that sun is based off of the location. So I can go into here, I can say get a location, and let's find Fayetteville. Let's just go to Little Rock. That's close enough. So now that light's been adjusted to Little Rock, and there's the latitude and the longitude, and you can specify the hour of day. See, you can watch that guy start moving around to start to create very specific lighting conditions for your rendering. So and you'll notice right now the reason this thing is blown out right now is because the lighting situation I have set up for this is to use scene lights, and the default scene is not really recognizing the Mental Ray, and it's just blowing everything out. If I use Illuminate with default lights, it'll bring it back to normal. So now that I have a light in here, when I hit render, it should start to render the scene with, you start to notice the building. And there we go. Now let me explain to you what you're seeing right here. Now you're seeing the rendering go through several processes. Like right now, it's going through and doing an initial pass to get all the points and places in the scene. You can see it's gathering the points right now, and then it's going to come back in and finalize the rendering and smooth out the lines, finalize the calculations, and those kinds of things. Now this is where this is a side jog into computers. You'll notice that there's only one white box jumping around right now. Sometimes you'll see two. This computer I have, it's a single core with no, it's a single processor with 2 cores. So the computer can only do 2 processes at a time. It can only render with 2 cores because that's the most it has. That's why a lot of people, and especially in our recommendation on computer workstations, we suggested a lot of cores, because this is what is really intensive on your computer. As this rendering is starting to finish, if I had 8 cores, then I would have 8 different processes working on this animation. It would cut it by 1/8. It would take 1/8 of the time. So that's why when you're going out to buy a computer, it's really important that you get a good chunk of RAM, and you get as many cores as you can afford. Now, and one thing that you should pay attention to is that if you have a 64-bit operating system, it is not going to increase the speed of your rendering. It's just going to give you the ability to open larger files than a person with a 30-bit operating system could. So, as this rendering finishes, you'll be able to see the result of your first rendering done in 3ds Max using Mental Ray. Here you can see it's starting to go through and finalize the rendering. It's actually doing the rendering right now. As you can notice, there's no more lines. Everything's starting to look a little smooth, starting to come out. Look pretty good. And there you go. There's your final rendering. Now, now that you're done with this rendering, you're probably wondering what to do next. You're going to save the image, and you're going to save it to whatever folder you want. And this is our recommendation, is for you to save it as a PNG. It's a large file size. You're not going to lose any. They call it lossless codec is what they call it. So you're going to save the image out, give it a name, hit OK. Now, if I go to the desktop, hit Window D, you'll notice that when I open the image, the background's gone. That's what those white squares represent. This gives you the ability to go in and put trees without having to Photoshop out a color in it. Notice how even where the glass is, if the color was behind it, that would have been a nightmare to go out and edit in Photoshop. Now you can start to drop in your materials and trees and entourage and start to really dress this up. Now let me go back into 3ds Max and show you a couple more things. Once you're done with the rendering, you can close it. Now, one thing that people and students oftentimes forget is that square images sometimes are not the best proportion, so you're going to want to go in here sometimes and make this rendering large, because if you're going to do a final production, and you're going to print it off at a large scale, so you're going to want to make the image pretty large. And 1200 by 700, or you just sometimes think in like 16 by 9 proportions, similar to monitors, that gives you a nice widescreen rendering that you can use to give your presentations in. So that's it for this tutorial. You've figured out how to make a camera, set up a light, and do an initial rendering. We'll go into other render engines using 3ds Max and other environment techniques, and how to actually create an entourage and start to use that in 3ds Max for later tutorials. Thanks for tuning in.